She was just trying to keep her son fed when the twins stepped out of the cottonwoods, barefoot, pale as moonlight, and carrying a strange proposal in their hands. "You want a home," one of them said, "and we need a wife for our father." In the dust-bitten silence that followed, the past stirred, and nothing would ever be the same again. The wind pulled at her coat like it wanted her to turn around, to go back where the world had already burned. She didn't. She walked with one boy clinging to her skirt and the other swaying fevered in her arms, his forehead pressed to her collarbone like a dying ember tucked against cold flesh. Her boots were cracked, feet blistered. There hadn't been water since yesterday morning. Food was a memory. Still she walked. The land around them was colorless, wide and dry. Not dead, just waiting to be. The sky above, drained of blue, sat low on the horizon like it wanted to fall. The prairie stretched to forever in every direction, and the road beneath her feet had long since stopped pretending it led anywhere. Still she followed it. She didn't think about names anymore. Not of towns. Not of people. Not even her own. Names were for folks who had time to be remembered. A lump of wood rose out of the flat distance, warped white walls, a sun-bleached cross, a steeple like a broken finger. The church stood crooked, leaning westward, its door hanging off one hinge. It had no congregation, no preacher, no promise. But it had shade, and the wind didn't quite bite there. She pushed through the door and stepped into silence. Inside, the air smelled like dried rot and old prayer. She laid her younger boy down in the corner, beneath a cracked window, and wiped his face with her sleeve. He whimpered, too dry for tears. The older one didn't speak. He hadn't since the fire. He just stared, always staring, at things she couldn't see. He sat beside his brother and pulled the hem of her coat into his lap like a tether. She dropped to her knees in front of what used to be an altar. Cross long gone. Candles melted into the floor. She didn't speak, just folded her hands and listened to the silence inside her own head, where she'd buried every plea that had gone unanswered. The door creaked. Two girls stood just beyond it, barefoot, hair in twin braids like rope. Their dresses were the same shade of dirt as the ground outside. They were no older than 10, and they looked like they'd walked out of the land itself, carved from dust and sun and sharp little bones. One held out a piece of cornbread. The other had a water skin slung over her shoulder. "You want a home," the first girl said. It wasn't a question. The widow rose slowly, eyes wary. "I want my boy to live." The girl nodded. "That too. But you want a home." The second girl stepped closer. "We need a wife for our father." The widow blinked. Her mouth opened, closed. Words didn't make it out. "He don't hit," the first added, like that was the main thing. "Don't drink neither." "We can feed your boys," said the other, "if they're not too loud." The widow stared at them. "You don't know me." "We know enough," they said together. The older boy stood suddenly, legs stiff. He walked to the girls and took the cornbread, then carried it back to his brother and broke it in half. The widow watched, throat tightening. Her stomach twisted at the smell of food. She hadn't realized how close she was to crumbling. The girls turned, walking away without waiting for an answer. After a moment, she rose and followed. They led her through a narrow trail that split from the main path like a secret. Brush clawed at her legs. The boy she carried was nearly weightless now. The other walked without question, one hand curled in her skirt. The canyon opened like a mouth. The trail narrowed between red rock walls that rose high above, closing out the sky. Wind died in the gap, and every step echoed back like a ghost's whisper. She should have turned around, should have asked more questions. But she didn't, because no one had offered her anything but doors slammed shut, and this was a path someone had opened. The canyon spilled into a hollow, hidden from view. Trees clustered near a slow stream. Grass still grew. The wind returned, gentler now. A ranch sat in the middle, wrapped in fences and silence. Horses milled in the corral. A chimney smoked faintly. She stopped walking. It looked real, lived in, cared for, like someone had chosen to stay. The girls had already reached the porch. They turned, waving her forward. She moved slowly now, carefully. Every step felt like crossing into a story that wasn't hers. The dog on the porch didn't bark, just watched her pass with eyes like damp coal. Inside, the house smelled like wood smoke and old things that had lasted, leather, dust, bread. A stew pot simmered over a fire, thick with root vegetables and meat. The heat wrapped around her and the boys like arms. The twins disappeared into a back room. She stood near the door, afraid to take off her coat, to claim space she didn't understand. Her older son sank onto a worn chair. The younger one, cradled in her arms, moaned and went still. Footsteps creaked above, then down the stairs. The man wasn't large, but he filled the room. Thick-shouldered, rough hands, hair black streaked with gray, tied at the nape. His face was hard, mouth set like it hadn't smiled in a year or more. His eyes weren't unkind, but they were tired. Deep tired, the kind that comes from too many fights survived and not enough finished. He looked at her, then at the boys, then at the stew. "I didn't send them," he said. "I didn't ask to come," she answered. He nodded once. Not agreement, not refusal, just marking truth. She adjusted the boy in her arms. "I'll work for my keep, just a few days, until he's better." He glanced toward the fire. "Your other boy don't talk." "Not since we lost their pa." The girls returned, carrying blankets. The man didn't say yes, but he stepped aside. That night, the fever broke. She sat awake through the dark hours, staring into the fire. One boy curled against her leg, the other sleeping soundly for the first time in too long. She watched the man move in and out of shadows, never speaking, always watching. A man built from silence. The girls whispered secrets under their breath, their twin voices curling around the rafters like smoke. Outside, the prairie whispered. Inside, she didn't run. And for the first time in months, she wasn't moving forward. She was still. And that, somehow, felt like the beginning of something. The land looked different in the light of morning, less like a place she stumbled into and more like a place that had been waiting. Mist floated above the ground in ribbons, catching on the fence posts and wrapping around the boots of the man standing at the edge of the field. He wasn't moving, just watching, like he expected something to emerge from the horizon, but didn't much care whether it came in peace or not. She watched him through the kitchen window as she wiped the table clean. The girls were already outside, barefoot in the dew, tossing corn to the chickens with practiced hands. Her boys sat by the hearth, one drawing shapes in the ash, the other resting his head in her lap with his fever broken, but his strength not yet returned. Quiet had settled over the house like dust, soft and deep. She stepped outside with a half-empty coffee mug, not sure if it was politeness or instinct that pulled her toward him. He didn't turn when she approached. "You don't sleep much," she said. "Land doesn't either." She stood beside him, mug in both hands. The valley spread out before them, greener than anything she'd seen in months. It wasn't untouched, just fiercely held, like someone had bled into it to keep it whole. "You built all this yourself?" "Most of it." He shifted his weight slightly, favoring his left leg. "Got help once. Years back." "You've been alone a long time then." "Long enough to know silence can be friend or warning." She looked at him sidelong. "And me? Which am I?" His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Jury's still out." He turned and walked toward the barn. She followed, out of curiosity, out of caution. The morning smelled of hay and iron. Inside, the barn was dim but orderly. Tools hung in neat rows. The horses, lean and quiet, watched her pass with calm eyes. He reached for a bridle and paused. "You ride?" "Enough to stay on." "Good. Got a fence line needs checking. One of the posts is rotted out by the creek. I'll hitch up a horse for you." She didn't question the task, didn't flinch. Work was the only language both of them understood fluently. She took the saddle and cinched it herself, noting the way he watched her hands. Not judging, just measuring. They rode without speaking for a while, the horses trotting slow along the outer edge of the field. The morning was still cool, the sun not yet punishing. When they reached the bend where the land sloped toward the water, he pulled up short. "That post," he said. "The one leaning." She slid off her horse and crouched beside it. The base was soft with rot. Water had eaten through the lower ring. She shook it gently. It wobbled. "You got new timber?" He nodded. "In the shed, back at the barn." She glanced at him. "So this trip was just to show me the problem. I don't like wasting timber. Wanted to see if you knew what you were doing." She stood slowly. "And?" He met her eyes. "You passed." She exhaled a laugh, surprised at herself. "I wasn't auditioning. You think I let just anyone near my girls?" Her smile faded. "They came to me. They see things." He looked out across the field. "They've been through things. More than I wish." She waited, unsure if he meant to go on. He didn't. Instead, he turned his horse and started back. She followed, heart thudding with questions she hadn't known she wanted to ask. That afternoon, she wandered out behind the barn again, drawn to the grave she'd seen before. The flowers were wilting now, bent under the weight of the sun. She crouched beside the stone and traced the marks carved into it. Not letters, symbols. A language that felt older than the dirt itself. She heard footsteps behind her. "She was Apache," he said. His voice wasn't soft, but it wasn't cold either. "They gave her that stone. Said it would keep her name safe. She didn't rise. She was your wife." He nodded. "They gave me her hand to keep peace. Then they hated her for giving it. Same as the settlers. Same as both sides. So where did she belong?" He sat on a stump nearby, resting his bad arm across his knee. "Nowhere. That's the cost of being between. She died here. She bled, trying to give them a brother." His voice dropped. He didn't live. Neither did she. The silence after that wasn't one she could break. Later, when the sun dipped low and the air turned to copper, she found herself back in the house, slicing potatoes with the girls. The boys were outside chasing fireflies with tired laughter and dirty feet. She listened to the twins hum a song she didn't recognize. Their rhythm was off, like they knew the tune by memory, but not by heart. When the man entered, he paused at the door. Dirt streaked his shirt. His left hand held a bundle of wild onions. "They're good with you," he said, almost to himself. She nodded, but didn't answer. The girls kept humming. That night, after supper in silence, after the fire crackled low and the children slept, she sat on the porch with her hands around a cup of tea. The moon hung low, heavy and yellow. He joined her without invitation, without words. They sat that way for a long time. She spoke first. "The boy who died, did you name him?" He hesitated. "Then I whispered it to the earth when I buried him. Then it's not lost." He looked at her, not with surprise, but with the same quiet recognition he gave the land. "You believe in that?" "I believe in naming things, even the ones that hurt." He didn't speak for a long while. Then he leaned back, letting the old boards creak beneath his weight. "You planning to name this place something different?" she asked. "I don't name things I don't own." She met his gaze. "Maybe you don't have to own something to belong to it." He looked at her like he wanted to disagree, but couldn't quite manage it. Inside, one of the boys stirred and called for her softly. She stood. "I'll keep working," she said. He didn't nod, but he didn't stop her as she stepped back through the door. Behind her, the prairie shifted under the moonlight, quiet and waiting. Rain came to the valley in the middle of the night, soft at first, like a whisper brushing against the roof, then steady as drumming hooves. She woke to it and didn't move, only listened, hand resting on her younger boy's chest as he breathed against her ribs. In the next bed, his brother stirred, eyes open, not afraid of the storm, just watchful as always. Thunder rolled far off, and the walls of the old house creaked like they remembered older storms. By morning, the land had turned dark with moisture. Mud clung to boots, water pooled in the low spots near the barn, and the air smelled rich with things unearthed. The girls danced barefoot through puddles, shrieking and laughing, their braids soaked and wild. She let them be. They were too often quiet. This joy was earned. Inside, the man sat by the window, knife in one hand, block of wood in the other. He carved without seeming to notice what shape it would take, his gaze locked on the tree line beyond the fence. "There's a trader coming by today," he said without looking up. "Rides through once every month or so." She nodded from the stove, where biscuits browned in a cast-iron pan. He bring mail? Sometimes. News, too. You trust him? I trust what I see in his eyes. His voice tightened slightly. That's all. Later, the traitor arrived with the smell of horses and tobacco and wet leather. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and a coat patched at the elbows. His eyes were sharp, always moving, weighing every corner of the ranch like it owed him something. He greeted the girls with a grin, the boys with a wink, and the man of the house with a nod sharp enough to slice wood. She kept her distance, standing near the porch with a dish towel in hand, listening. Been talk out past the dry river, the traitor said, pulling a tin from his pocket and tapping it against his palm. Couple fellas asking around. One with a Union jacket turned Confederate gray at the cuffs. The man stiffened. What kind of asking? Names. A woman. 2 boys. Said they lost someone. Someone owed. Her stomach dropped. She didn't speak. The traitor's gaze flicked to her, then back to the man. They riding this way? The man asked. Not yet. Not far behind, neither. The man said nothing, just nodded once. The traitor went on about dry goods and ammo, but the air between them had changed. The man didn't smile. He rarely did, but now his silence was edged like a blade. That evening, while the children were inside, she found him near the barn, oiling his rifle beneath the pale light of a rising moon. I can go, she said quietly, if it brings trouble here. He didn't look at her. They'll follow wherever you go. She folded her arms. I won't have them hurting this place. They won't. His certainty held weight, but she didn't trust it. You know them? I know men like them. I've buried enough to recognize the smell. She took a breath. I ran because I had no choice. He beat them. My boys. Said I was soft. Said he'd make men out of them. His hands paused. The oil caught the moonlight on the barrel. I stabbed him in the dark, she went on. Took the boys and ran before morning. Don't even know if he lived or not. He didn't deserve to. That's not how the law sees it. He set the rifle down gently. The law's a plank of wood in a flooded river. Might hold you. Might drown you. Depends who's watching. She looked at him. You think I did wrong? I think you did what a mother does when she has no one left to count on. They didn't speak again that night. But when the children were asleep, he bolted the door and laid his rifle across the mantel. In the days that followed, the air held something tight and waiting. The wind changed direction. The crows stopped their noise. Even the creek ran slower. She felt it in her bones, in the way the girls stood closer than usual, in the quiet that crept into every corner. Then, while washing clothes at the river bend, she found it, a boot print too large to belong to anyone on the ranch. The mud still held its shape, sharp at the edges, fresh. She ran back, breath burning, fingers clenching the wet laundry like it could shield her. That night, they moved the children into the root cellar beneath the kitchen, filled it with blankets and a lantern. The man walked the fence line twice, returned with sweat across his brow and a pistol tucked in his belt. In the stillness of that evening, the cook finally spoke. He'd never said a word before, not in the days since she'd arrived, not during meals or mending, not once. But now, as the sun fell and the house tightened its breath, he sat at the table and rasped, buried the last man who came sniffing. His voice was rough with disuse, like an old gate swinging on rusty hinges. She looked at him in surprise, but he said nothing more, just returned to peeling potatoes, slow and steady. The man gave her a letter late that night. If anything happens, he said, you take the children and ride west. Give this to the preacher in Stone Ridge. She took it, folded it, tucked it into the lining of her coat. Why him? He owes me. She hesitated. You think they'll come tonight? Not tonight, he said, but his eyes were watching the dark like it already knew their names. She slept in her boots. The rifle stayed by the bed. Every groan of the floorboards, every creak of wind made her sit upright. Morning took forever to come. When it did, it brought smoke, thin and rising from the edge of the far ridge. Not campfire smoke, greasier, dirtier. The kind of fire built by men who didn't plan to stay long. He saw it too. He stepped out, shirt half buttoned, and squinted into the light. "They're close," he said. "Too close." She stood behind him, jaw clenched. "What now?" He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for the girls, for the quiet life he'd stitched together with scarred hands. "We don't run," he said. "Not this time." Inside, the children played with dolls made of corn husks and cloth. The cellar waited beneath the floor. The rifle was cleaned. The boots were ready, and the sky above the valley turned the color of steel. The sun rose quiet and reluctant, casting a pale gold light over the wet hills and burnt trees. Fog clung low to the valley, curling like smoke from a wound that hadn't healed. The homestead stood still as a painting, nothing moving except the faint rustle of laundry on the line, and the wind teasing the fringe of the girl's shawl as she watched the trail from the porch. The man hadn't slept. Neither had she. They took turns pacing, watching, listening. But dawn came, and with it silence. No horses. No gunshots. No shadows stretching down from the ridge. She wanted to believe they'd passed by, maybe followed another trail. But something in her gut said otherwise. Men like those didn't forget. They circled like wolves, tight, careful, waiting for the moment a door creaked open. Inside, the children sat close together. The older boy helped the cook sharpen a carving knife. The younger whispered stories to the girls, making them laugh despite the fear that hung heavy around them. The man rechecked the fence line. When he returned, mud crusted up his boots. He said, "Two riders. Camped near the bend. Same smoke, same tracks." She steadied herself on the porch rail. "We have until night." "Maybe." The day passed slow, each hour thick with dread. They moved the children again, deeper into the cellar, this time with food, extra lanterns, and quilts thick enough to silence a cry. The girl, eldest of the little ones, clutched a doll made of old shirts and whispered, "Will you come for us after it's done?" She knelt, her hands resting gently on the girl's shoulders. "I'll never stop coming for you." They sealed the cellar door with flour sacks and barrels of dried beans. If anyone came looking, it would seem like nothing more than pantry storage. Back upstairs, the man spread weapons on the table. His old Colt, a double barrel, a sawed-off tucked in a boot sheath. She eyed the tools of violence with a cold calm. She didn't flinch. "I'll take the left side of the house," he said. "I'll take the right." He glanced at her, long enough for silence to become meaning. Twilight crept in with long fingers. The first hoot of an owl echoed from the woods. Then a crack, the unmistakable sound of brush snapping under boot. Close. The man tensed. He moved to the window and parted the curtain with 2 fingers. "Coming in slow," he murmured, "like they want to talk first." She loaded her rifle. "Then we listen last." 2 men emerged from the trees, shadows clinging to their backs. One tall and wiry, coat dragging at the knees. The other thick in the shoulders, face hidden under a brim pulled low. They stopped just short of the fence, hands nowhere near their guns. That made her more nervous. The tall one called out, voice flat and hard, "Ain't here to make trouble." The man stepped onto the porch. "Then you're lost. We're looking for someone. Aren't we all?" The thick one spoke next. Lady with 2 boys. Took something that wasn't hers. She walked out beside him, rifle at her side, but ready. "I didn't take anything," she said clearly. "I left what I had to." The tall one smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "That right." The brim of the thick man's hat lifted. His jaw was dark with stubble, his nose crooked from an old break. "We just want what's owed." "No law sent you," the man said. "No law needed," the tall one answered. "We got word from her husband's brother. Says those boys were his blood. Says she's got no right to run." Her voice cracked sharp across the air. "That man was a monster. Not our concern." "It should be." The tall one stepped forward. "Tell you what, give us the boys, and no one else gets hurt." The man raised the Colt. "Step 1 more inch, and you'll lose more than your hat." And then it happened all at once. A flick of the tall man's wrist, gun drawn. A flash of fire from the porch. The man's Colt roared, and the tall one staggered backward, dropping like a sack. But the thick one charged, shoulder first, through the porch rail. Wood exploded. The rifle flew from her hands. She scrambled backward, breath shallow, eyes darting for another weapon. The thick man lunged for the man, slamming him against the wall. Fist struck ribs. Elbows cracked jaws. They rolled, kicked, bloodied the floor with fury. She grabbed the shotgun from the table, aimed, but they were too close, locked together. She screamed his name. He ducked at the last moment. The shotgun roared. The thick man fell. Breathless silence. Smoke drifted from the barrel as she dropped the gun, knees buckling. He caught her before she fell completely. His arms wrapped around her, strong despite the gash on his temple. The children stayed hidden. The cook never moved from the cellar door, blade gripped tight. The fight was over before anyone above could speak again. By sunrise, the bodies were buried. No ceremony, no words, just dirt and silence. The man sat by the stream afterward, water washing the blood from his hands. She joined him, knees in the cold mud. "You all right?" she asked. He didn't answer. He only stared at the current. After a while, she said, "You didn't have to stand for me." "You stood for them first," he said softly. A hawk circled high above. The land, wounded but still breathing, stretched out around them. In the distance, the trader's wagon creaked down the ridge road, maybe with news, maybe with silence. She looked toward the house. Smoke curling from the chimney. Children safe, still asleep. "This place was never meant to last," she said. He shook his head. "Then we build it again. Better." And they sat like that, mud on their boots, blood on their clothes, and something unspoken between them. A promise not of safety, but of standing, of choosing, of staying, even when the wolves came back.